Hi friends, welcome back to Arc Tutorials. This is Angular 17 full tutorial series for absolute beginners as well as expert developers joining us from previous versions of Angular. We are continuing to learn about data binding, and today we are going to learn about event binding. In the previous episode, I covered property binding. Make sure that you go through that. This is part 26 of the series. And if you have missed out on the awesome 25 episodes, make sure that you go through the entire playlist so that you can learn and master Angular 17 with me. Alright, so what is event binding? Just like property binding, we can do events and we can bind the events. Now, events are nothing but JavaScript events. For example, on click, on key up, on key down, mouse up, mouse out, scroll, etc. etc. All the JavaScript events can be binded to the HTML elements. Just like property binding, event binding is also one-way flow, which means data will go from component class to the template. How do you write that event binding? We will write that event inside the function bracket within the template. We will implement that particular function in the component class. If you don't do this, you will get errors. I'll show you that also. Let's get started with our hands-on. Let me bring up the editor. Let me first type the command ng-serve. So we start the application. All right, our application is running. It's on localhost 4200 by default. We implemented /admin route earlier and we did this property binding example of image and all that. So let's continue over that. I will comment off this image because it's taking too much space and I don't want you to get any confusion. Okay. All right. So for event, now let's say I have a link, right? And or we can say we can have a button that we want to implement. Say we have a button in the function bracket, you'll write click. In JavaScript, we write on click like this. See, these are all events that we can use. These are all JavaScript events. Okay, on load start, on load, on abort, on blur, on error, on focus, on key up, key down. So if you type on in Visual Studio Code, you would see all the JavaScript events. Now in front of them there is a keyword called on. You don't write that in Angular, you just write click. For example, if you see here, this is how you write JavaScript, on click. Now in Angular, you will write it between the function bracket and write just the name of the event. Here you're writing click. That means this is on click what has to be done. Now let's call a method and we'll say button clicked. And it's just a regular function. Now you see it's immediately giving you error because we have not implemented the button. Okay, I'll show you that. So when you save it, it will give you error because we have not yet implemented. So it's a one-way data binding. That's why you will go to the class, and inside the class you will write the same method as a function. Okay, now you don't have to write the keyword function here. Usually in JavaScript we would write like this, but in Angular you just write the name of the function. Okay, however there can be something called private, there can be something, by default it's public, but you can make it private or you can make it protected. Right, that we can do, that we will learn later. For today, since you're learning event binding, just the name of the event and do a console log which will print in the browser and say button clicked. All right, so now this is the same method that we used in template. Now when user clicks on this button, this method will be called. The method is implemented in the component class. Let's go ahead, click this, and you can see here in the console log, if you see, the value is saying button clicked. That's one simple example. Let's modify this little bit. On button cloud, I'll say class name should become if class name, if this dot class name is equal to C1, make it C2 or else C1. Okay, so I'm basically using a conditional statement to check that every time on button click, if the class name is C1, make it C2, else make it C1. So see, now look at this. Now I click on it, the color is changing because I'm dynamically changing the property of this particular class name, right? Same way you can also change, say, this dot disabled, right, is not this dot disabled. Now see, every time I click, this will become disabled. On click, it will become enabled, right? So one single event binding, which is on click, is changing the properties also. And now you are learning multiple things together. One is interpolation, the second is property binding, the third is to actually change through event binding. Okay, I'll give you some more examples and use cases of event binding. Let's go. Now let's say you want to have an input type equal to text. Input type text, and we will say on every key up we should capture the value. Okay, so let's say capture value. Now this is a method I'm defining for this input. Let's close the input. We need to implement this method. Go to the components class and you will write the function name and implement it. All right, now this is how simply you can use the key up. Right, now on console.log we can just say captured value, and here you can just say event dot key. Now event, we can pass it through the method, and you need to pass it here. Since we are not passing it here, what we can do, dollar event, and we are passing the dollar event, which means that we are passing the value to it. And here we need to typecast it in the component and define it, let's say any for now. Okay, and all right, so now let's when I type something, you go to console, you can see here now every time we do something it will say capture value ARC shift, right? So if you don't have this, you can just see the key event that was captured, ARC. You can see here the values are printing, right? So that way you can even capture the event through dollar event. Okay, this is yet another example of event binding. You can pass a function and you can bind it over. The last thing I want to show you is on mouse over, right? So the event is mouse over. In JavaScript we'll write on mouse over, so you can say on mouse over, and you can also write mouse out. So this I'm showing you an example of multiple on mouse out. This is an example where you can see that I am doing multiple binding of events. This is multiple events binded. Now we need to implement both of the functions in our component class. So go ahead, copy this, and in the component class function, pass the event, and for now do any, and console.log mouse was hover, same way on mouse out, console.log mouse was out, right? I'm just giving you a simple example of console log here, but we can do a lot of things like changing the properties, values, etc. So see here, I'm taking the mouse over, it says it's hover, and we can do mouse over, and I can change the value. That would be easy for you to see the change. If it's C1, make it C2, else C1, and we'll write the opposite of this. If it is C2, make it C1, or else C2. Now see, you can see on mouse over and mouse out, it's just changing the property of the colors, right, of the div. So we can do a lot of things. The idea here is that this is event binding. You bind the events to the HTML elements, and you implement the methods in the component class with your business logic. All right, and this is one way because the data goes from component, that is the class, to the template. Okay, I hope the concept is clear. In the next episode we will learn about the two-way data binding, very important concept, especially when you work with forms. All right, that's all for now, and I'll see you in the next episode. We'll learn about two-way data binding. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you're learning. I hope you're enjoying. Please do hit that like button and subscribe button. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.